Welcome back. We are on video number 8 of our message series called Seriously, based on the book by Skye Jethani called What If Jesus Was Serious? We're looking at chapters 46 and 47 today, and we're working through the Sermon on the Mount. And we're getting to one of my favorite parts, and one that is quoted very often about judgment, where Jesus declares, "Judge not that ye be not judged." And I know lots of people like to quote this ones, Christians and not Christians. And I mean, our culture seems to be one of tolerance. We accommodate all choices as valid and all values as equal, except maybe when it comes to being judgmental, we can't tolerate that.
No, not really. No, but I do think we need to talk about this. You know, we do very much use this incorrectly, definitely by Christians. Like, this is not like this is, we all can do this. And how we quote this verse, because there is really the idea of judge does have two meanings.
Yeah, there's two very different meanings.
It's very much.
And it's interesting. I noted in the book that when he talks about the two definitions, there are two very different definitions, both in the original language that was written for the Bible here, but it's exactly the same two definitions in English, in modern English today. And the first one is that the definition of judgment is that we're discerning between two different things. So an example of that would be apples are not oranges. The second one would be of judgment is that you're in a place of superiority in order to condemn the other side or something else. So in that case, if we took the exact same example, we would then say apples are better than oranges.
Right.
So which is Jesus talking about when he says, do not judge?
Well, and this is the eternal battle. Well, no, it's pretty easy. He's not talking about discerning.
No.
Like, because he does want us to know the difference between things like right and wrong, good and evil.
Yeah, and that's coming up in another video shortly here in another part of the Sermon on the Mount.
Exactly.
So I agree with you. It's not talking about the discerning part.
No.
So it comes down to the one where Jesus is talking about where judging where we're in a place of superiority in order to condemn someone or something. So why doesn't Jesus want us to think of ourselves as superior to someone else and condemn them?
Well, I mean, there's lots of reasons, but one of the reasons I actually read and several commentators say this is it's basically we put ourselves in that point in the place of God.
Yep.
So when it's not our job to condemn, like, it's one thing to sit there and say, and discern, like, oh, that's not good.
Yeah.
That's really good. But when we add condemnation to it, that's the issue. And so really a lot of it is about the superior place, or ultimately we put ourselves in the place, in the shoes of God. I
think when we do that, it devalues the other side.
Absolutely.
Or the other person.
Well, and at the elevation of yourself.
Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, well, exactly. Because we want to, we often do it so that we can make ourselves look better. But I think when it's done repeatedly, it can lead to some very dark places.
Oh, absolutely. We devalue the other person, which can so much lead to injustice.
Yeah.
And lack of respect. We could treat them. We give them, basically gives us an excuse to treat them in a terrible way.
So yeah, if we devalue them enough, we convince ourselves then that they're not worthy of my time, my respect, or anything like that. So then I will treat them how I want. So if we take that to the worst possible case I could think of, I found some statistics from the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, and the German government during World War II used propaganda to devalue the Jewish people. And because their country had a successful economy at the time and a very good foreign policy, people in the country were actually feeling very good in general about the government and how things were going in their country, because it was bringing some prosperity to the country. So they were eventually able, after a long history of propaganda, they were able to actually pass laws forbidding Jews to own a business or carry on a trade, and finally leading to the point where they were exterminating them.
Yeah.
So it's so hard for me to imagine where normal people get into a place where they would kill innocent people, their neighbors, people they know, and in the past did business with, traded with, had respect for, maybe even married. it boggles my mind that they would get to a point where they had been devalued to a point where they weren't even considered people anymore.
Yeah, and we see this unfortunately throughout a lot of history through just like years and years, and when it comes to prejudice and racism and all that sort of stuff, which is ultimately we're looking right at this very thing. Yeah,
and I think if I listen to the news, it scares me a little bit these days when I hear different sides devaluing the other side. Yeah. It's like we can't have a healthy discourse anymore without some sort of smear campaign.
That's right.
And that not saying we're there, but it does make me think that it doesn't. If we hear it enough, it's going to cause some of these injustices to start to happen.
Well, I would say that we've seen injustices happen on that. I think they'll get so much bigger.
Yeah. So I think if we were just to sort of sum up what Jesus is saying here, is that we might disagree with someone, and we might even discern that something or some ideology is wrong. But as soon as we get to devaluing the other person or people group or ideology through condemnation, we cross a line into judgment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think when we condemn people, we are definitely declaring that they have no worth, and really ultimately they're no value, and even in the eyes of God, even like that's something that's a message that we can send to people.
So if we're Christians and we devalue somebody, by inference, God devalues them too. And I think that comes from what you said before, is when we condemn people, we put ourselves in the place of God.
Yes.
And so that then shows that, or makes people believe that God devalues that particular ideology or people group as well.
That's right. So we are all made in the image of God, and we are worthy of his grace. That's why Jesus came. It's not, in the case, it's not just for Jews or Samaritans, but for everyone, regardless of race, gender, religion, etc.
Yeah. And I just wanted to bring back to the point that we talked about before, is that we often don't start out with the intention to devalue someone. A lot of times we fall into judgment as a defense mechanism to elevate ourselves, with the byproduct then of reducing the other person or group by judging them.
I think in all this, like I just bring it to almost a more of a community level. A lot of this we do see. If you've read the book The Other Half of Church, Michael Hendricks and Jim Wilder, and they do talk a lot about the times of using of that discernment. Mm-hmm. You are like somebody has done something and it's been hurtful. It's been wrong. And having the idea of using the discernment and then responding in love. This condemnation is passing sentence.
Yeah.
You're responding in love, and they talk about basically you're reminding them of the identity they have in Christ. Mm-hmm. And you're inviting them back into that identity. And I know I've been able to be on both sides of that, where I've been, had to been told, hey, that was wrong. But seen with such love in that it wasn't wrong. It wasn't condemnation. It was let me bring you back into this identity. And where I've been in the position where being able to do that, or, hey, this thing you do is wrong. It was wrong, but you're loved, and it want to bring you back into that. I want to see the best for you. And I know in both, thinking of specifically of instances. Oh man,
instances.
Thanks. We'll use that one. How valued I felt in that process, mm-hmm. in knowing that when I extended that, how that person talked about how valued and loved they felt in that process. Mm-hmm. And just the wonderful of being on both the sides is that this is when it's done so right and proper. Mm-hmm. I can speak from experience that you do feel immensely loved and valued. It's not condemned, it's loved. It's, hey, that's wrong. Mm-hmm. But let me bring you back in. Remind you.
Yeah, and I've seen the actually opposite of that as well. I was watching some YouTube videos where I think people confuse the discernment and the judgment.
Oh, absolutely.
And they take discernment as judgment or condemnation, when really they're just having a discourse about right and wrong. Mm-hmm. And I know it can, in our culture, we get that thing where we tolerate everything and we value everything the same. And I don't think that's real or correct. I think we obviously people are allowed to have their opinions, and we do live in a society that allows us to have that, and that's great. But I do think there are some absolutes, and we have to be able to, again, I think that's what you called group identity. If you and I both agree that that's how we interpret what we're reading, and we're going to decide what is right and wrong based on that, which we do. And then if we're in agreement on that and I fall out of that, then you can gently bring me back into that by reminding me of what I agreed to.
Yeah. And that's why we look at it in community. And sometimes we might take a different approach to something that's someone who's out of community and stuff like that. But I do think that's just important.
Yep. And I think there's a helpful video from the Bible Project. It's called Justice. And in the video, and I would highly recommend you watch it. And even the way they draw the video was quite astounding to me. They use like almost it's very simple drawings, and it looks like cardboard boxes almost. But they show the devaluing of people by levels. So everybody kind of starts off at one level, and then as they talk about injustice and people elevating themselves, the other people drop down. And then through the redemption of Jesus, he's bringing people back up. And it's a very beautiful video to watch from that perspective. But I like what Tim says in the video. I just want to read it for you here because I thought it really kind of sums up what we're talking about today, and also gives a bit of a different perspective on the commentary. And so this is the surprising message of the biblical story. God's response to humanity's legacy of injustice is to give us a gift, the life of Jesus. He did righteousness and justice, and yet he died on behalf of the guilty. But then God declared Jesus to be the righteous one when he rose from the dead. And so now Jesus offers his life to the guilty so that they too can be declared righteous before God, not because of anything they've done, but because of what Jesus did for them. If God declared someone righteous when they didn't deserve it, the only reasonable response is to go and seek righteousness and justice for others. And I think that's what we were talking about earlier, where we see where God's love has been shown to us, and then we in turn show that love to other people. Absolutely.
And that is the command of Jesus, is to love one another.
Yep.
On John 13:34.
Yep. And I love the way, I forget who I was listening to that said this, but they said, like, the actual word there is, I'm giving you a new command or commandment. And when the disciples would have heard that, they would have, being good Jews, would have thought of this is like one of the big 10 commandments from Moses, and that not just anybody can say that, but they respected Jesus' authority because they did believe he was the Messiah. So when he's giving them a new commandment, it is important. Yeah. It's paramount. It's a big deal. So love each other as I have loved you. So,
well, it does kind of, remind me of John Wesley. He says the judging that Jesus condemns here is thinking about another person in a way that is contrary to love.
Yeah.
So it's breaking this commandment, this important thing that is stopped, where basically, as you said, the disciples would have stopped and like, okay, you're saying something here. I need to listen.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, then if you're doing this judging, you're contrary to that very command.
And just to sum up just what you said and how the chapter comes to a close, there's a quote from Greg Boyd in the book, and it says, "It's impossible to ascribe unsurpassable worth to others when you're using others to ascribe worth to yourself."
Oh, wow, yeah.
I thought that was very poignant. So I guess if we were to sort of sum up what we learned today, it says that we cannot love and condemn at the same time.
This is sounding a little bit like you can't follow God and money at the same time.
Yeah, I think Jesus was very, he got to the point, and he really, again, it comes down to the choices we make.
Yeah. All right. Well, again, we just hope that this is leading you to some more thoughts. We hope you're enjoying the book. Hope you're enjoying the videos. We hope that you are growing with us in as we just explore and really be challenged by this idea. What if Jesus was serious? There are some discussion questions that'll be linked in the notes for you to again take some time and discuss with a friend. If you're part of a community, to take some time and talk about it with your missional community group, and to really maybe talk about places where we've maybe overstepped and we weren't discerning, but we were condemning.
Yeah.
And it's, I don't mean that in a way to condemn all of us, but moving into just a self-awareness of maybe where we've made those mistakes and some growth that we need to have. And we want to be challenged to be loving those around and to discern the right and wrong, and to respond in a way Jesus would have commanded us to love each other just as he has loved us. So we got another video coming up soon, and thanks for joining us.